Good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you're joining us from. I thought I'd jump online right now. I've got a spare moment or two to talk about a topic that I don't think I get to talk of enough of the time. It's just not a topic that's spoken about very much at all. It's a topic that's almost avoided in the musical world, and it's the topic of improvisation in classical music and soloing and improvising in classical music. And it's something for years I have been advocating people to try, to give a go, to add to your repertoire and enjoyment of playing piano, for numerous reasons. The first reason being that back in the day, improvising on classical music was a very normal thing. Composers, performers would always improvise, and it's sort of a curiosity as to why it's no longer there. It's sort of been sterilized out of the classical music tradition. There are reasons for it, by the way, historical reasons, which I might get into today if it's of interest to you. And secondly, the principles of improvisation on classical music is not that different to the principles of improvisation on blues or jazz, or popular music. There's stylistic differences. There are things that work potentially in classical music that might not work in jazz, and vice versa. But putting the language and cultural differences aside of the different types of music, the whole principles of improvising and soloing on this music is very, very similar. Most of the time identical. And there's so many interesting parallels between the two. And so, yeah, it's just such an important topic, this is, and it just sort of gets missed out because I think people, they don't know what they don't know. They'd never thought of asking, can I improvise on a Mozart idea? And the answer is yes. And not only yes, Mozart did. The cadenzas in his piano concertos, he never wrote them out. They were just these moments for 2 minutes or so where he'd just go off and improvise. And so what we hear concert pianists play today in those moments of the concertos have been written out by another composer, and it is never improvised. Chopin used to sit in saloon bars and improvise, and In fact, I would even go as far as saying that jazz is quite difficult. Jazz is quite difficult because it can be very theory heavy. We are dealing with parallel seventh chords everywhere and 11ths and sharpen this and sharpen that. Classical harmony, if we're talking about 18th century, 19th century classical harmony, is much cleaner. There's more triads. It's harmonically less complex in some ways. There's other things that also make it harmonically quite sophisticated, but it's harmonically less dense. So for many people, I actually think improvising on classical music is probably an easier thing than improvising with jazz. So let's have a bit of a try at it. If you're sitting near a piano right now, I'd recommend you sit down and just let us know whereabouts in the world you're joining us from in the chat. I do have my eye open on the chat. I'm not the best multitasker, but please fire away with any questions if you do have any. This is a topic I particularly love. So you would see on our channel that we've had videos on blues patterns in the left hand. So you would have thought on classical music class we're going to start with the blues, things like this. And then we learn some right hand riffs to go with it. And that's the name of the game with blues. And there's many really great blues patterns to learn for the left hand. Like rock and roll ones, all sorts of ones. But the concept is exactly the same with, let's say, a classical Alberti bass. And so this is a groove. I talk a lot about grooves, but this is a groove that you would come across in classical music. It's a pattern, a repetitive rhythm pattern, and it's the Alberti bass. And if I demonstrate this just on a C major chord in the left hand, I get this. And that's how I'm playing this triad. And I can do inversions, like I said, my F major, my G major, my C major. So the first thing is, let's do some relative minor, A minor. So the first thing is getting used to that left hand pattern and not having it too low. It's not going to work down there as well. So we're going to be approximately in the middle of the piano when we play these chords. So perhaps what we should do now is let's just pick up a Mozartian sort of chord progression. So here's one. I've got that one in B flat major. Maybe I should give you another key. Give me one moment. No, let's do B flat major. We'll give ourselves a challenge today. I did have one in F major, but I'm tired of playing things in F major, so let's make it B flat major. So the first thing is we can chord this out, like we do with all chord charts, just to sort of find our place with it. And this is a very typical classical, mid-classical period type of progression. So I'm just very slowly playing through these chords, not in a particularly classical way, just to get a feel for those chords. This sort of C minor with an E flat in the bass, minor with the middle note of the minor as a slash chord, as an inversion. It's very popular classical progression, that is. And then on the second line, we have sort of these slash chords to create a key change effect. A C major over the B flat. And the music gently modulates then to F major, just for a very brief moment. So it's a very rounded classical progression. You come across a lot of these classical type progressions in popular music all the time. It's very clean, descending bass line, not too many sevenths being used, mainly just dominant sevens. You're not going to see parallel dominant sevens like you do in the blues. It's just going to be a very clear progression that's always moving forward. I guess you could say what characterizes the era of Mozart and Haydn is the music always has a sense that it's moving forward. It's never static, never just sort of stays in one spot. So it's harmonically always moving, and usually still quite repetitive in its chord choices, or conservative in its chord choices. Lots of 1, 4s, and 5s, and so yeah. So let's just play that progression again. Then we have this middle section in a minor key. Now it's moving somewhere else. A few suspended chords here. And then the F7 leading us back to the tonic, the B flat major, the first chord where it started. So that's a very typical classical progression. The key changes, the gentle key changes in the middle are very subtle. We're going from B flat major to that second line, that brief moment where it's in F major, which is very much a very similar scale to B flat major. It's just got one extra flat to B flat major, so the notes are almost the same. It's going to the dominant key, is what we would call it in musical theory terms. Very similar scale, just a slightly brighter effect. And then on the second section there, we're going to G minor, the relative minor of B flat major. And just for a brief moment, well, when I say a brief moment, 2 lines of that G minor, it's 8 bars, and then it ventured back into B flat major. So this is a good progression that we could use as our little classical improvisation. And if you're just joining us right now on this live stream, I'm talking about the topic of classical improvisation because it's a topic that's just not spoken about nowhere near enough. And I don't believe it's it's not a new radical concept, improvising in classical music. It's considered by many as a bit of a new radical concept, but it isn't by virtue of the fact that all classical composers and musicians in its time were improvisers, were phenomenal improvisers, and it was a part of the job. It was expected of them in so many cases. So it's quite odd how over the years it's become a sort of a lost art, so to speak. And it's an art we definitely need to bring back in our education for so many reasons. Because improvisation gives us the ability to understand a little bit deeper about how the music works. We're not just sort of stuck to a score like a slave, stuck to the score, slaving over the score, what the composer wrote, as if we're blindly running through the music, not understanding what it means. It just doesn't add up. You want to understand what's happening in the music. And so improvisation and soloing, the same things we do in blues and popular music and jazz, applying this to classical music, very, very powerful. So as advanced as this might look for some of you today, now we have this chord progression in our resources pack, by the way. So if you head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, and just ask for our free resources kit, we send you a special link straight away, and that progression will be sitting in there in the resources pack. It also the progression in a bunch of other keys. So now we're going to apply that Alberti bass to this progression. This is where it gets fun. So let me do this without the sheet music in front of me first. I'll just so you can see what I'm doing. And then I'll put the chords back in front of me so you can sort of track what I'm doing with the chords. So we've got, and it means you can hear how I play it a bit differently every time. So I'm going to use this Alberti bass in the left hand. Oh. 1. So because that's an E flat / G, I'm going to put the G on the bottom. 2. We get this descending chord progression. So let me play the chord progression. So what's going to work in the right hand here? This is where I think sometimes classical piano, or this type of classical music, theoretically is less cluttered and complex than something like the blues, where you've got, in the blues, you've got so many choices. You've got your blues scale, your major blues scale, your minor blues scale, you've got Mixolydian modes, you've got all these scales you can combine and choose from. But in this case, we really just want to be using a bog standard major scale. So we're going to play notes from the B flat major scale to determine my melodic improv ideas in the right hand. Okay, let's see how we go. And the nice thing is the scale is so... It's such a safe place to be. You can't really go wrong. It just fits beautifully with these chords. And even just being scalic, and so much classical music is just scalic like that. It's just walk up and down parts of the scale. And then you want to have a slightly rhythmic conception to it as well. Like I was starting with short little phrases there. I was making up something like that I was doing. And those little repeated notes. And faster scalic passages. That's a bit of a nice classical cliche. Third note of the scale, fourth, finishing on the second, which fits in with the dominant chord beautifully there. Okay, so let's try and put this. We'll go blind now, so you can't see my fingers. So the great thing about the limitations of a live stream is that, yeah, you can't just be looking at my fingers all the time. You have to look at the chord sheet as well and try and process this with your ears, which is really useful, by the way. So let's just try these first two lines. I have a key change on the second line. I'll talk a little bit about how I'm going to deal with that. But let me improvise on those first two lines now. There's my first two lines there. So I had a few interesting choices I needed to consider on that second line when I went to the C major over the B flat, the F over the A, because I'm preparing to key change there to F major. And I don't necessarily need to get too theoretical. I can just, a really good way when we start improvising and there's key changes taking place is we can just consider each chord on its own merits. We don't have time to think about too much theory when we're improvising, particularly if we're improvising a progression like this. So we got to that C major chord, and I'm just using notes that are available to me on a C major chord, for instance. So even just by expanding out on that C major chord with passing notes. I was even making a little trill there between the third and the fourth note of the C major scale, and I'm just expanding out on that C major chord. Okay, let's look at the second half of this progression now. This is where it gets quite fun here now. Let me look for that. So we go to the minor key now. Let me just bring this up. Yeah, so we go to the relative minor. So again, just visit our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, if you'd like to request this sheet music or this chord progression. We have this in numerous keys as well. It's part of our resources pack. So just ask for our resources kit. So everything you need is there. So you've got the G minor, and we've got the D major, and D7 over the F sharp. So we're really moving into the relative minor here. Alright, let me have a little bit of fun with this. Let's see where we can go. I love that semitone on the E flat to D there, on that D major chord. Now I'm on the F7. I'm just going to do a little pause here and do a cadenza. We're just filling up the notes in an F7 chord, really, which is very similar to playing a B flat major scale, and that leads me back to the beginning. And Mozart loves doing things like that as well as broken chords. This sort of so he loves doing things like, which works quite well when you're decorating an Alberti bass in the left hand. So on my F major chord, I can do little things like this. Whoops. There we go. Or scale runs again. That's a great classical cliche there. The second and third note of the scale resolving back to the first note. So yeah, you could get pre-existing Alberti basses from like any classical piece, like a Mozart piano sonata, taking an allegro movement or an adagio movement where he's got these Alberti basses, or Haydn as well uses them quite predominantly. And you could look at even improvising and composing your own right-hand melodies. It's a great exercise, great way for you to really explore and understand more about harmony. And so it's a great exercise. It's very challenging at first. It requires very good knowledge of your chords, obviously, and that's why it's a great exercise to do, by the way, because it requires good knowledge of your chords. Now, just to flesh things out a little bit, I'm going to help you with a little bunch of exercises that I have found really helpful in this topic. So, while we're on that topic, why did classical music, why did improvisation leave the building when it was such a commonplace thing in its day? And all the composers and performers were constantly improvising on their own music, on each other's music. They even had competitions on improvisation. Like they'd pick a theme and then everyone have a go. It's no difference to the barrel house jazz tradition, I guess, when who can play the meanest boogie woogie in the land. There was similar sort of duels that took place even in classical times. Yes, very different cultural contexts and very different style of music. But so why did it disappear? Why did it leave? And so there are some very well understood historical reasons as to why that happened. And just to sort of cut a long story short, it's a lot to do with the Romantic period in the 1900s. The rise of the composer was a very special time, really, for classical music. And really, Beethoven and Mozart were the last composers of a generation, or a bunch of generations before them, they weren't just totally reliant on writing music for heads of state, for royal families. Now, they still got commissions from royal families. Mozart was, as a freelance composer, he struggled financially, so it wasn't that he entirely succeeded with this new brave world of being a freelance composer, but he was one of the first. And then Beethoven, probably he had periods of time in his life where he was broke, but most musicians would say great musicians have had that. Great and not great musicians have had that experience. But Beethoven did manage to really be fiercely more independent, and he probably was the foremost, most independent composer of Europe ever to start with. Yes, he got commissions from some very, very high-end members of the Royal Societies, but he would do everything on his terms, and even to the point where he threatened to leave Vienna at one point because he wasn't getting enough work, and then a whole bunch of people got together and says, "Look, we'll just pay you whatever you need to compose your wonderful music. Vienna needs you." And then after that, it became the norm. Composers and the publishing companies really played a big role in this as well. So this is where improvisation started to disappear out of classical music, because you go the next generation of composers who were more specialists in specific areas. It might be Chopin was a specialist of solo piano music, as was Franz Liszt. Schubert was the specialist of the song, writing songs, and wonderful, wonderful songs. And Wagner or Puccini were specialists in opera. And so composers then cut out their niche, and the rise of the piano and musical instruments in wealthy middle-class homes in Europe meant that composers could sell their sheet music through publishing companies and actually make a very serious living out of composing music. So it's very hard today with our modern technology world we live in to understand the difference that made to people's lives, the composers' lives. I mean, publishing companies were like the recording industry are today, or the recording industry were in the 70s and the 80s in their peak time. It was a huge industry. And Franz Liszt, I mean, he was almost quite entrepreneurial in a sense, because he would rearrange Beethoven symphonies for duets on the piano. Or even just a single versions where just for two hands or for four hands, because it meant all of these upper middle class homes had pianos of some sort in them, but someone had to play them. And there was no one had a music sound system. This was the sound system of the home, so someone had to very quickly learn how to play piano very, very well and sight read all these latest works that had been published by all these great composers of the time. And so very quickly, and often these people in the household were women. And so we had all of these amazing, not well-known, amateur, you could say, women musicians who were phenomenal sight readers, because to be able to just pick up and sight read a Beethoven symphony and play it for your family. And they had to learn it fast, because if someone goes to the trouble to buy a piano, this is like a jukebox in the home with a play button, but someone's got to have to play it right. So this is really high level skill, and so that people in these households must have had. And it's just such a shame none of it was recorded, because the level of musicianship that must have been in these homes would have been outrageously high. And today any of us say, "Oh, I'm a professional musician. I'm a songwriter." I don't really read much music. In those days, that was the only choice, to read the score, the written score, to be able to present what Chopin had written. And Chopin and all these composers were improvisers at heart. They all improvised a huge amount of the time, but now they really took writing it out very seriously, because they could get paid by doing that. And then very slowly, improvisation started to sort of disappear out of the musical culture, because what was actually happening was we were now getting this wedge between what the performer and the composer was, which, I mean, that's not the case in popular music. It's not the case in jazz. In jazz, you've got the band. You might have a soloist that's written the piece, but it's a collaborative effort. It's like, here's my tune, but we're all going to do things with the tune, and it ends up being a fully collaborative effort. The composer's not like a god. And it's the same in songwriting. But this, and it was the same in classical music before the rise of the publishing companies. In the Baroque period, the keyboard parts were usually just left hands written out with chords, and the keyboard player sort of chorded it out. But then after that era of the Romantic period, that's where the change happened, and it influenced all the conservatoires in the 20th century. You then had this wedge of, this is the composer and this is the performer, and the two have absolutely nothing to do with each other. You're a composer, you write music, and the performer plays exactly what the composer wrote. And it was a result of that process of publishing companies and the middle classes owning pianos and needing someone to play them that led to this shift. Written score is very important. It's a wonderful form of recording. It's actually a very accurate form of recording. Maybe more accurate even than the microphone, because you can see everything the composer intended. But for composers like Chopin, he was such an improviser at heart. I think sometimes I notice in some of his scores, I feel, we're going to improvise a bit in the style of Chopin right now, actually. I feel he wrote, things like his etudes, he's thought them out very, very thoroughly. But other pieces he wrote, I've always sensed they're improvisations. They've just been written down because he had no other choice. It's like, I think, but some of the right-hand materials to me feel like an improviser. And even when I play those pieces, I feel like, do I have to play everything he's written here? Because I feel very connected to improvisation. Anyway, that's the end of the history lesson, but it's very interesting, and I have simplified it just for time purposes. So then when we get, I've got a couple of exercises here. So this is my little Chopin-like exercise here. Actually, I don't even need to show you my sheet on it, because it's easier to show you this from the fingers. So we're going to compose a Chopin-style prelude right now. It's going to be one of his more somber ones. And I've nicked this idea from his E minor prelude, if you know this one. And by the way, if you really feel you need to improve on your chord playing, you should consider some of our courses, like the Complete Musician course, because it addresses all of the chord playing in such resolution and detail, and it's a lifelong resource. So you can head on over to our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, and ask about our Complete Musician program. I'm going to talk a bit about it a bit later today. So let's do this Chopin improvisation. So if you're sitting at the piano, you can do this with me. And this is not quite as structured as the Mozart one. So this is quite a fun one in a way. So just the left hand, we're just going to play a C minor, and then an A flat major. I'm just lifting the top note of the C minor chord to get that inversion of the A flat major. Now my right hand, I'm just going to improvise in C minor. And for a little bit of fun, we're going to cross hands over. And then back over. Now, this is a little passive at the moment because I'm just looping around the same two chords, so it doesn't quite sound like Chopin yet, but that's okay. We're just getting into the groove. So we're just going to keep doing this for a little bit first. Some trills can be quite fun with this. Okay, so now this is where we start to have some fun with the left hand. So what we're going to do in the left hand, we're just going to wander off piste a little bit. We're just going to change any note we want from this central C minor chord. Let's say I'm just going to go down a semitone from that C, and I might go down a semitone from the G at the top, and I'm just changing one note at a time, be it the top note or the middle note. So I'm just wandering away, completely wandering away out of the key. And then, if I feel I've just wandered away too much, I just go straight back home again to the C minor again. And this is a trick that's so often used in Romantic period harmony, in 19th century harmony. This sort of wandering away chromatically and then just returning again. If it were in the Mozart era, Mozart would feel he'd have to prepare us to move away. He would have to create some cadences. He'd be more methodical about the way he moves away. But then when we get to Chopin, Liszt, Wagner, that period, it's like, nah, just go. And then come back, and then just go, and then come back. They took a far more liberal approach. So this is the irony, that in the whole composer's circles, they were improvising more. They were writing with even less formalized structure. They were starting to experiment more and more and more. But they wrote everything down exactly to the T, because that's how they could get paid for it. And then other people would go and perform all the fun that they were having. It's like just writing down a jazz solo and everyone playing that exact jazz solo forever. And I mean, there are some classical composers that, from that period, with every note they wrote down was unbelievably amazing, like Chopin. There are pieces by Liszt I look at and I think this is just a funny improvisation. Not funny improvisation, but it's just so improvised. It feels that it's like, why would I be bothered learning this when I could just improvise? That's what an improviser would say, though, right? But then there are other composers from the period like Brahms that I cannot pick up any improvisation in Brahms. Brahms is so unimprovised, and for a composer like him, the written score is absolutely critical. I mean, you could just feel he's painstakingly thought about every single note, to the point where it's like, yeah, there's just zero improvisation. So different composers sit on a different scale, but this sort of exercise is very characteristic of Romantic periods. I'm going to do that again with that sort of wandering away with semitones, and I'm going to continue improvising on the C minor scale, crossing my hands over. Let's just see what happens. You can do this with me. It's a really fun exercise. You can really get lost in the music. Back home again. Yeah, you can get really carried away with that. Now, that was far from perfect, right? It's an improvisation, so certainly not meant to be perfect. But I mean, I'm just going to say right now, I can guarantee you from everything I know about a lot of this music, if Chopin entered the international Chopin competition, he wouldn't even get through to the second round, because he plays his own music. He would have played his own music. I can't prove it. We've got no recordings, but from all the historical documents I can take from it, he would have played his music so differently to how it's played today in this paradigm where the composer and performer have no interaction with each other, that it wouldn't get a look in. And isn't that sort of weird? And of course, music evolves and changes over time, and fashions change, and trends change, and there's so many amazing pianists that they play the music to, or even a higher standard to probably how the composer could have played it, technically speaking. But maybe, just maybe, something in the soul of the music is lost with this pursuit of perfection, of technical perfection, of mastering the music of the composer even beyond them, and removing all the spontaneity that was in the spirit that might have been there originally. And we just don't know, because we don't have recordings. We can only go by the stories. And if we're thinking of a composer sitting in a saloon bar playing these somber chords or playing waltzes, or it's just a very different sound and even the instruments were very different. The piano sounded very different in those days to what it sounds like today. So improvising on classical music is not a radical idea. That's what I'm proposing. It's actually a very historically viable idea, and it connects you just a bit more with the musical ideas. And of course you can go back to playing from a written score, but it's good to just get little sections of pieces of music and jam on it. I mean, even if you get a piece like, you could just sort of float some D major over the top of it, using the same principles that we do when we improvise on popular music or jazz. And I just think it's for those of you who do have a bit of experience playing classical music, or even if you have no experience playing classical music, don't deny yourself the chance to explore the music deeper than just what's on the skin level of the score. And it helps connect ourselves to so many different styles of music. So many different styles of music, and seeing the commonality of them. There's a famous story. Well, it's not a famous story actually. Vivaldi, when he wrote a lot of his keyboard music, he wrote a lot of music for keyboard and cello, harpsichord and cello. And so in those days, he would just write the left hand. He would assume the keyboard player knew what chords to put in the right hand. He would basically write a chord chart, a lead sheet. The presentation of lead sheets in those days are different to the ones, contemporary ones, but they used a lot of Roman numerals, for instance, numbers. But it's called figured bass. It was a very popular way of music being played in its day. And the publishing company said to Vivaldi, can you just, write out some right-hand parts for the keyboard players, just give them some guidance. He wrote this furious letter to his publishers. Like, what's wrong with keyboard players these days? Do I have to spoon-feed them this stuff? I mean, they've got a bass line. And that Pachelbel's Canon, that's a very good example of a bass line, and a piece that would have traditionally been improvised to the bass line. Maybe not in this jazzy style I'm playing it in now, but that approach, that spirit, was commonplace in its time. And to me, just when you look at pieces like Pachelbel's Canon, it's sort of a shame the whole thing it's always got to be played the same way on the same type of scoring. The piece was a jam session. Absolutely was a jam session. Everything about it. So I hope that just gives you a different relationship with the music and with the score. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to fire away. I'm going to, this is the thing. I think what I need to talk about here is, what does this mean to you? Because the 21st century music student has so many things to think about, and their training, I think, needs to change to reflect that. Because the 21st century music student, and I'll give you my 20 plus years of teaching people from so many different countries all over the world, here in London at the London Contemporary School of Piano. What I have learnt over the years is that the 21st century music student is interested in so many different things. They want to do a bit of everything. They want to play a bit of popular music. They want to play a bit of jazz. They want to play a bit of blues, a bit of film music, classical music. They still love classical music. Classical music's going nowhere. It's still an incredibly important, rich part of our musical life, and the piano is so connected to it. That's why I'm passionate about these topics. But I think the 21st century music student is interested in so many things. I mean, you might not like everything, but they don't just want to put themselves in a box. And so we need to adapt our training to somehow universally be able to connect all of these styles of music together, because they do have common ground. And that's why I so often talk about these 4 very, very important pillars in our playing. And if any of you who are watching this and you know the 4 pillars, you can put it in the chat to tell me that you've been listening, because this is so important. The 4 pillars. What's pillar number 1? Chords, chords, chords. It's so central to all of this, understanding chords. Even with that Pachelbel Canon example. Rather than just blindly looking at a score where the notes are all written down and you're working out each note individually, and you have really no idea what they mean. You're just learning it note by note, rote type of learning. Maybe the reason why I know that generally by memory, not perfectly by memory, is I'm just recalling the chords: D major, A major, B minor, or the position of the chord in the scale: chord 1, chord 5, chord 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5. Yeah, I'm adding some cheeky suspensions there that might not be in the original, giving it a slightly jazzier feel. But the framework of the piece is driven through chords. So this is the really interesting thing. Piano is a really, really difficult instrument. I'll be honest with you, it takes more than a lifetime to master the piano. If anyone can master it in a lifetime, they're good for you. But I think you need 3 lifetimes to master it. But the good news is, once you understand how chords work, this is your low-hanging fruit. Chords are not rocket science. They're numbers in a scale. Yes, there are some chords that are very complicated, let's say in types of jazz, but that's a specialty form of music. In most of the music we hear and play on the piano, it's a mixture of major and minor chords with certain dissonances added. Be it Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. We've got a video coming out on this one soon. It's just broken chords. That's the whole piece. Or Bach's C major prelude, or an Elton John song, or the Taylor Swift's latest album. Doesn't matter what it is. It's all built on chords. So if you just want to do a sing-song around the piano with your friends and just bash out the chords to the song, it's all about learning to fluently play chords. That's your first pillar. And that's why I call the first pillar chords, 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 because despite how difficult it is to master the piano, it's not difficult to coherently play a set of chord progressions if that's where if that's what you're doing with your training. So there's your first pillar. What's the second pillar for the 21st century piano student? Well, to bring those chords to life, you need rhythm and groove. Today I was showing you some classical grooves. Those Mozart, Alberti bass things, they're classical grooves, they're classical rhythms. But of course, a groove or a rhythm pattern could be, it could be Latin grooves, there can be jazz grooves, but these are cultural rhythm patterns that, when plugged into chord progressions, it could be swing. It could be. It could just be sort of a nice sort of cocktail rolling piano thing, or a pop music type ballad groove. These are subset templates and rhythm patterns that bring chord progressions to life that reflect different styles and cultures of music. So let's say now we've learnt about chords, harmony, we can play chord progressions fluently. Now we can add some groove to that second pillar, and we're learning a different subset of grooves that we can put over chord progressions. Now we're now making some really good progress, 60%. Where there's so much amazing things you can do with that. I know professionals who play in amazing bands and groups. That's their job, right? Is to just play chord progressions with a lovely sense of groove. They don't do anything else. That's what they are required to do. So this is a really lovely skill. So we've got the low-hanging fruit, which is the chords, and then the sort of next level, which is the groove. You've got to get your rhythms down, and then the third area for the 21st century piano student is improvisation and melody. Whether you're improvising melodic and scalic content over the groove, or whether you are adding melodies to these chords. Now it's starting to get harder, right? This is where there is more coordination required, more practice, more study. This is not low-hanging fruit, but it is still the third pillar down that track, down that line, and it is a wealth of musical riches. And by the way, if you struggle just with a simple improvisation exercise, like the ones we did today were not simple, right? But if I was to take a more step-by-step approach, like I do in my courses, I'd be just getting you to play a scale against the rhythm pattern, against the groove in the left hand, just to get the hand coordination, be it a jazz one, be it a classical one, regardless of the style. So there are ways you can practically learn coordination steps just to build your technique up to get there. And then the fourth pillar, and this is the pillar where I'm still working on. It is the arrangement and the integration of all these parts and the fine-tuning of all these things put together. This ain't low-hanging fruit, right? So, on the internet we hear two things. There's just two things I hear all the time be it on the web, or just in general in the pedagogical music world. You can learn piano in 10 days. Take my course. Well, yeah. See how that goes, right? And then the other extreme, 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours and you might be like half decent, but you probably won't be. Which is a bit depressing, right? It's not really going to encourage you to want to learn, right? There is truth, very tiny truth in both statements. I don't like both statements. Chords are right in front of us. The low-hanging fruits are right in front of us of chords, groove, rhythms. So much you can do with that. It's not in 10 days, but you can learn quite quickly and swiftly if you've got a good study program in front of you. However, something like adding improvisation to that, basic improvisation tricks can be learned quite quickly, but more complex ones, more integrated approaches, adding arrangement, melody, harmony, putting all those things together, understanding how they work, that takes a lifetime, 2 lifetimes to learn. But hey, this is about enjoying music ourselves and having a journey, going on a musical journey. And I really think this 21st century approach is so critical for students of all levels. You could be a complete beginner. I wish someone had told me this stuff. You could be intermediate. You could be returning to piano after a long time. I think this realignment and this new approach is so important, of the 4 pillars, is so important for, let's say, the 21st century student who might be joining piano after a period of time. And that's why we have our Complete Musician course, because it is a comprehensive study program where we explore those 4 pillars to the nth degree, and we in a detailed, step-by-step, methodical way. I'm just going to show you a little bit about the course right now and the structure of it, because even if you don't take the course, right, I want you to just see the structure of what it looks like, and how it can apply to you. Maybe you can find ways to apply this structure to your own playing, regardless of whether you'd want to do something like this. So I'm just going to share my screen with just some of the general structure of what these 4 important pillars of music, be it popular music, be it classical music. This is applicable to all keyboard styles of music. And I've put this together, really as a program of my lifelong work in education. These are not theories. These are practical, real things that have been proven and worked out in a classroom with real students who have real difficulties and struggles with things, and real problem solving, and research and development. Over 20 years of research and development has gone into this. So what's the first pillar? Chords, chords, chords. Now, it's not about, by the way, I'll give you a little secret with learning chords. Learning chords is not about learning every inversion, shape, permutation of a chord and writing it all down. If you've got that engineering head on you and you've made a spreadsheet and you've got every different permutation of a chord and you've studied them all, that's not going to get you there. Chords are a language. You don't have to know every chord. If you don't know what a flattened this, or if you don't know what you can't construct a 13th or an 11th, well, if you're not playing much jazz, you won't need to construct 13th chords. So chords are a progression. Instead, chords are a narrative. They're a musical narrative where one idea melts into another idea, melts into another idea. Chords and harmony in music is a horizontal construction. It's not a vertical chord, chord like that. It's not like that. Chords are, go back to that Pachelbel's Canon things. They're a dance between major and minor. They're a tension and resolution, a tension and release. And it's just this constant musical narrative of tension and release. And we just use the same progressions in so much music over and over and over again because it works. It has that, it creates that energy in the music that we love to hear. So chords are a language, and so that's what we would do in those first two modules about chords. On that first pillar, we would really explore and discover the culture and the understanding of chord progressions, and of course, yes, learn tricks and ways of playing inversions and seventh chords and so on, but in a real language-like way, where you're going to learn, instead of just playing chords verbatim, to play it in a musical language-like way, and in a very step-by-step way. We really just not moving too quickly. In fact, the first two classes in this course, I'm planning to run over that 95-minute mark. And by the way, this course, everything is pre-recorded. So, well, not pre-recorded, everything is recorded for you to listen back to afterwards. So those live broadcasts you can come back to afterwards if you can't make the time. 8 p.m. London time, we try and keep that as a sweet spot. It's good for the States. It's good for Europe. It's good for our people in the UK, obviously. It's not perfect for every country. I apologise if it's not perfect for your country. But you can self-study the material as well. Then that second pillar, what's that? Groove. Groove, melody and groove, putting the two together, but particularly groove. Rhythm patterns, rhythm templates. And in this module, we have this groove tech that we use, all of these groove templates that cover a whole wide range of different musical cultures and styles, and we start to plug them into our chords to really bring our chords to life. We have a module on improvisation and melody as well. Melody is actually infused in both the groove and improvisation, because the pillars do interrelate with each other. So going in this order is really good. If you're looking to self-study stuff like this, you start with your chords, you add groove, you add a bit of melody, but you really focus more on groove than melody. Then you move to improvisation. You start studying improvisation, then you start bringing groove into your improvisation, pushing those rhythms into the left hand, seeing if you can freely play scalic material in the right hand. And then, obviously, this is a lot of work, this course. We have study week, we have a lot of support. The thing with a lot of online courses is that there isn't that chance for people to get that support they need. It's very much like, oh, here are the videos, go watch them. Well, I mean, that's what... That can be quite limited. And I've been running a music school for the last 20 years, and that approach doesn't quite sit with me. So this is an online course, and that does come with huge benefits. But I want all of our students to have the chance to get that support. So there's chances for our students on this course to record anything they're playing and email it to us. We have designated support with our amazing team to give you feedback if you have any questions, to give you feedback, to give you answers to your questions, any struggles. Even the chance to have we have a limited time with this offer to give people the chance to have an actual complimentary one-to-one lesson, be it online or in our studios, probably online if you're not based in London, to get that amazing support. So that's also an option for anyone who's going to sign up to the course before the deadline, which I'll get into when that is. So that study week and that support, it just makes a big difference. And you can take the complimentary lesson whenever you like. It's entirely up to you when you want to take that. I suggest within a year of this program. This program runs for 2 months, by the way. And no, you're not going to learn piano in 2 months. But you're going to have a way of self-assessing where you're up to with your music. A way of having that assessment, that self-assessment. And that's so important, because I see so many people getting frustrated with their practice, and they say things like, oh, I sound crap. And anyone who knows me knows that my students aren't allowed to say that. I instead make my students stay, instead of them saying I sound crap, they have to tell me, well, I'm for the first pillar chords, I'm going okay at that. I'm struggling a little bit with these types of progressions. My rhythm is a little bit and groove is still a little bit square. I'm not quite feeling it yet. Just a few gaps in my rhythm. I need to slow down. That's proper self-assessment. So what you get from programs that are structured like this is the ability to self-assess where you're up to. Not just to say, oh, I sound crap, or I sound good, or I sound okay, but actually be able to say, I'm up to here. I'm struggling a bit with this still. This has gone quite well. This has gone not so well. Just working on this now. And have that self-awareness, you bring that into your musicianship. That's when you really start to make progress, because you can see the path in front of you. And it's so important. And then we bring those. So this is where we get to that fourth pillar, is where we bring this all together, but we use exciting examples. So we explore those four pillars through the lens of pop music. We explore those four pillars through the lens of classical music. We have fantastic classical curriculum and popular music curriculum in this program. We explore the lens of this music through blues, the lens of the four pillars through blues. And we bring it all together for a fun-packed finale jam session. And so this course comes with personal support from me and my team. Our team are some of the most gifted, innovative piano teachers you'll find anywhere in the world. Recruiting a London Contemporary School piano teacher is a very, very difficult thing. It takes months, sometimes years, to find the teachers we're looking for. We're quite a small team because of that. The teachers at our school, I've learnt so much from them over the years. There's a lot of their research and development has gone into this as well, through their classes and through our working together over the last 2 decades, looking for the most proven ways of helping that 21st century piano student who might just be a hobbyist or who might have more ambitions. It's really not so much tailored to a particular level, this course. I would say if you're a complete beginner, maybe it's too difficult. If you are, however, though, a returning person to piano, you played for many years, you stopped, you've been on and off, something like this is perfect for you. If some bits are hard, you've got everything is recorded for permanent access. One thing I would say is we do have a special coupon code, and this is only for our YouTube fans, and maybe some of our students who've been with us for many years as well. It's a coupon code for anyone who doesn't want the extra support, and you can purchase this course on a lower rate with the coupon code, but it means it doesn't come with the support. But I think blending it in with the support, the chance to get a one-to-one lesson with our team as well, it's a very rare opportunity, because I don't think we'll be able to do it again in the future, because our team won't have the capacity. We really only have this opportunity up until the end of this week. Up until the end of this week, I know all the places will be full. You can get the program. And you can also get the program with a special add-on if you'd like to study with me directly. We do have a little special VIP group for that. However, the main price there, the 475 price, which I think is about $600 US, we're talking about 16 to 18 hours of training. So I don't know what that is by the hour, but given its lifelong value, it is lifelong access to this material. And the support, the lesson with our team that you get as part of the course, the one-to-one lesson, it's very significant value, particularly given the fact it for many people, this is the 4th time we've run this program, it has had a lifelong effect on their playing. I do remember one particular moving anecdote actually was the first time around the course was in 2021, I think, 2021. And that was a funny time because it was like there was the pandemic, so things were open and then shut, and everything was sort of all over the place. A lot of our students in London were recommending their friends take this course because people had the chance to learn piano for the first time in a long time, because they were struck off work. And I mean, 4 years on, the course has improved massively since then. We've upgraded every aspect of it, production, the whole thing. We've got an amazing production team bringing this program. Engineers from the likes of Abbey Road Studios mastering the sound, and I mean, it's pretty intense. So we've got really high-end production on the sound and everything now. But back in 2021, when I ran it, and we went through these pillars. Now I remember a lot of my students were recommending their friends join the course, and that December I had a gig. It was my only gig in December. One of my students invited me to play at a lovely club in London, and it was for a private event for about 80 or 90 people, and it was just before everything was going to get locked down again. So I was just there in time to do a nice gig that December before we had that lockdown Christmas. And I remember as the piano arrived at the venue, lovely Bluthner grand piano, and then as I got there, some gentleman was there just warming up, playing the piano, and I didn't know who he was. Was he a person at the event, or was he working in the building? I don't know. And he was sitting there, and he was just beautifully playing Bach's C major prelude, and it was great. I enjoyed listening to him play it because I could walk around the room and hear the acoustics of the piano and see if it was in the right spot. And then after he played it, I was about to compliment him. So it was lovely playing. Thank you, sir. It was really helping me hear the piano in the venue. And he said, "Tom, you don't know me, but I took your course this year. I cannot thank you enough. I haven't played piano in 20 years, and I can do all these things." And it was quite moving, actually, because the playing was at a very beautiful standard, and he hadn't touched a piano for 20 years, and told me he got up to something like grade 3 as a kid, and it was just someone who was recommended. We've got numerous other anecdotes. We've had students have released albums as a result of taking this course, and written compositions, and it's really because the thing with these 4 pillars, you can do what you like with it. There are no rules as to how you work with these pillars. It's not like you have to use it to be a classical musician, you have to use it to be that type of musician. These are just pillars that are so relevant, and of course these are things we've been developing for over the last 2 decades. So if this is something you would be interested in doing, I suggest you get in touch with us. Visit our website, contemporaryschoolofpiano.com. I'm going to put a link, just a little private link to this page, because this page, by the way, cannot be found on our website. It's because our course is near capacity now. So I had a really good question. Would Keith Jarrett be a good example of improvising on themes of classical music? And actually, yeah, Keith Jarrett, I think he's a great example in the sense that he really mixes the tradition of classical improvisation and jazz improvisation together. He has a lovely album, by the way, called Book of Ways, where he improvises on a historical clavichord. And it's like Baroque music styled in a little bit, with a bit of jazziness to it, because it's Keith Jarrett. But music of the Baroque period was very, very improvised. So it's great to hear one of the great improvisers on the piano of our time, Keith Jarrett, playing in that style. It's called Book of Ways, that album. So in the chat, I've put the link. I'll also put it in the description if anyone's watching the replay of this. We have a special coupon code. So if you want to access the coupon code, if you don't feel you want all of that extra support, you just want to take it on a self-study basis, this course, you can also email us. I'm going to put our email address. It's admin@contemporaryschoolofpiano.com. So you can just ask for the self-study coupon code, I guess you could call it. You can also email me directly. It's tom@contemporaryschoolofpiano.com if you have any questions about the program. It's been a pleasure playing some classical music tonight, improvising on classical music. That's not one thing we cover too extensively in the course, improvising on classical music, though towards the end of the course, I am planning that we will blues up Chopin. So if you find that sacrilegious or offensive, don't join this course, because at the end we will be bluesing up some Chopin as a way of demonstrating how all these pillars cross-relate over centuries and time. And if that just feels too out there for you, I understand. But this is the 21st century, and I want to making music. It's an adventure. It's a journey. We're going to go on a journey together in this program. We're going to go on a journey together. Go on this lovely adventure. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being perfect to the historical features of the music. There's many great places where you can learn those sort of things, but I want our students anyway to have a holistic understanding of music. Play music on your own terms. Doesn't make it easier. There's still challenges. We've still got to problem solve, but we've got to make this a joy, right? That's what it's all about. It's about having lots of fun. So to finish off with, I'm going to improvise on a classical. I'm going to take a request, right? I'm going to regret doing this, because this is not easy. I want you in the chat to give me the name of a pop song, and I'm going to mash two pop songs together in a classical sonata style. I'm sure I'm going to mess this up. So in a classical sonata style, righto. Let me just warm myself up for this. You often can see some videos of me doing this online when I've done this in my concerts, but I usually only share the ones where it's a great success. The ones that go, that's just for the audience, right? So this could go any way. So just give me the name of any pop song. And I will improvise on it in some sort of classical sonata way. Any takers? Oh, you're all very well behaved, not putting me through my paces. Well, okay, if no one's going to put me through my paces, then I'm going to finish off by just improvising a nice little prelude here. Let's say, let's pick a key. What about A flat major? Beatles medley. Okay, well, actually, speaking of the Beatles, I could get a little bit historical with the Beatles. Belinda has was it Belinda or someone else? I think it was Sue suggested Human Nature. They're an Australian band, so I'm trying to remember any Human Nature songs. I can't believe my mind is, I cannot find any in my head right now. I'm sure I know a whole bunch of Human Nature songs. They're just not not registering in my brain right now. I think there's a duet that they did with John Farnham, which is in my head, I think. But actually, Bill's mentioned the Beatles. I just had a bit of a brainwave, because we were talking about Keith Jarrett's Book of Ways and Baroque music improvisation. So I'm going to fiddle around with the sounds on my keyboard right now. I'm going to change my keyboard to a harpsichord sound. So let me do that. This is how we're going to finish. We're going to finish with me playing a harpsichord sound. Let me find this. It should be here somewhere. Here it is. Okay, which one's better? Oh, maybe that. Yeah, I like the sound of that one. So I'm going to play because I was thinking of this song the other day. This is Yesterday by the Beatles. I was thinking how the melody's quite ornate and scalic, and how it would make a nice Baroque keyboard composition. So I'm going to play Beatles in a sort of Baroque period sort of way. Wish me luck. This could go anywhere. Have a lovely evening, everyone, or morning, or afternoon, wherever you're from, wherever you're joining us from, and we'll speak soon.